yes? Yeah. Everybody. You're very welcome. My name is Michael, and I am a sheep and cattle farmer. What we have here are border collies, okay? And these are the dogs that we use to manage the sheep and cattle. The border collie are considered to be the most intelligent breed of dog in the world, okay? Now, I suppose how we breed them. We breed them like you would breed racehorses. We breed from the best to the best, and like racehorses, we do not always get the best. Okay? So, just because they're registered bred and just because their parents are superstars and all the rest of it, does not necessarily mean to say you're going to get the material. And that is the dog that will work the sheep and cattle. These dogs have to be totally dedicated to their work. They can't be indifferent in any way. They have to be focused on their job at all times. So when they're pups like Glenda, we let them have a good time. We let them run around. We let them see everything. Get used to all the noises on the farmyard, machinery starting up, all that sort of stuff. And between the ages of 3 and 12 months, normally they will start to work themselves, okay? So I have a little pup at home at the minute, and she's about 7 months. And the other evening I was walking down to the farmyard and I was walking through the sheep, and all of a sudden, boom, she just started to work like that. Wow. And before she was walking through the sheep, she didn't even see the sheep. But then she was all business, and the natural herding ability comes out in the dog, okay? Now, what we'll do is, I'll just explain to you how we train the dogs, okay? So the natural instinct of the border collie is to hold the sheep to the shepherd at 12 o'clock. So we'll call this wool on the ground here the sheep, okay? We'll call the end of my crook here the dog, and I'm the shepherd, right? So the natural instinct of the dog is to hold those sheep to me at 12 o'clock, right? So that enables me to put left and right on the dog. Because the dog naturally holds the sheep at 12 o'clock, if I walk here, the dog will automatically be here. If I walk here, the dog will automatically be here. I'll show you this now in a second. If I walk to the right, the dog will automatically hold this 12 o'clock position, all right? So that enables us to put left and right. So I keep walking to the left, I keep repeating a command. The command we use the most is come by to the left. So I keep saying that, come by, that'll do. Eventually the dog will know that's its left-hand command. Away to me, away to me, away to me. Eventually the dog will know that that's its right-hand command, okay? Now, because we use these dogs on the mountain and because we use them at long distances, naturally enough they won't hear my voice, so we put whistles on the dog. So you could train the dog from the beginning on whistles. We train them on voice and we then put them on whistles, okay? So we have to train ourselves before we train the dog. So we're not mixing ourselves up or mixing the dog up, right? So every dog has its own set of whistles. So we can put one dog to the left, we can put the other dog to the right, and we can work the dogs independently of each other. The moral of the story is, a lazy man will always have a useful dog. Now, we'll show you the dog doing a bit of work. Come here, Jim. Jim, come here. Jim. So Jim is 2.5 and he's mad in the head. And we'll show you Jim working in a minute. But anyway, Del, here, that'll do. Del, that'll do. That'll do. Stand there, stand there. Now we'll send Del for the sheep, right? So if I send her on the left hand side, she'll go to the left. If I send her on the right, she'll go to the right. That'll do. Come here, Del, here. So what side do we send her, left or right? Now we don't know where the sheep are, so she'll have to turn back there. Sheep go down this way. Are there sheep down there? No?
Look at this.
No sheep. This is some sheepdog demonstration. That's bad, isn't it? We'll have to use this as the sheep. Sheep are €5 extra. The sheep are up there hiding, they're camouflaged.
Oh!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh!
Now, we'll show you what we're talking about, right? So, the dog will end up at 12 o'clock to me, right? So watch the dog when I walk around. This pup is making an advance. So watch where the dog is, look, see see that? That's the natural instinct of the border collie. That you cannot train into the dog. The dog either has that or they have that. Right? So if I walk here, see the way the dog is opposite me? If I walk this side, the dog will end up naturally opposite me, okay? So, we then put voice commands on that. So the command to the left is come by. Come by. Wait to me. So that's left and right voice commands, right? Now, that's the left whistle, the right whistle, okay? So that's just showing you how we can maneuver the dog around. Now the reason we put sides on the dog, the reason we get the dog to go left and right is that eventually we can teach the dog to drive the sheep away as well as bring the sheep to us. The natural instinct is always for the dog to get to the other side. We eventually teach the dog to drive the sheep away. Back again to the lazy farmer. We get the dog to do all the work. Now, I'm going to tell you about these sheep. These are what we call Wicklow Cheviot sheep. And these are the sheep that are indigenous to the mountains all around us here. And they're a good hardy breed of sheep. In Ireland, what we use the sheep for is meat. Wool is a byproduct of the sheep. Unfortunately, there is no money in wool. Wool is a disaster. I actually sold cattle to a wool merchant about 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me this story. Back in 1947, he was telling me of a farm of land that was sold. And it was sold for 7 fleeces of wool to the acre. This is the truth now. 7 fleeces of wool in 1947 would buy you 1 acre of land. Today, 7 fleeces of wool would buy you a cup of tea and a sandwich. And that's the way the price of... Last year, the wool was the worst price in living memory. It was about 50 cents a kilo. The average fleece of wool would be about 3 to 3.5 kilos for a good fleece of wool. So that's 150 cent. If I had to employ somebody to come and shear my sheep, it would cost me $2.50 or $2.25. So there is no money in wool. Most of the wool that we were supplying was going to the Chinese, and they have stopped buying wool. So if you want to buy a bit of wool, I'll sell it to you there now. For a fiver.
How much for this bit of wool right here?
You can bring that with you. Now, so the gestation period for the sheep is 5 months. We put the boys with the girls typically in October, and we have the lambs around St. Patrick's Day, around the 17th of March. Have you heard of St. Patrick? Yeah. Fantastic chap. Took all the bad things out of Ireland. Had a little rowing boat, put all the wolves and the bears and the coyotes into it, and brought them, and the snakes, brought them to America. We don't have a predator. The reason I'm telling you that is, we don't have a predator that will actually eat the sheep. An adult sheep, there is no predator. Now, the reason that the sheep move from the dog is considered to be the predator, right? And not every dog is capable of moving the sheep, a very important fact. The sheep are not stupid. The sheep will have a look at the dog and they'll say, "You're not moving me." And the dog will say, "What did you say, sheep?" And the sheep will say, "I wasn't talking to you." Now that's the tough dog, but the weak dog will say, "Listen girls, would there be any possibility of you moving there, please?" And what happens to that dog is the sheep will hit them with their head and they will run the dog out of the field, and that's the truth. So the dog has to have this presence, they have to mean what they're saying, and they have to keep coming forward. The whole idea of these dogs is to move livestock. So the lambs are born around St. Patrick's Day, and the reason for that is in this part of the world the grass starts to grow around that time of the year. Now, we land the sheep out in the fields. We'd land the sheep in small enough areas. We'd have maybe 200 or 300 sheep in about 15 acres of land. And we would walk through the sheep every 3 to 4 hours to check on the sheep to make sure that everything was good, that they were able to have their lambs. We use the dogs and we use this thing here. This we call a shepherd's cleek, right? Or in this part of the world we call it a gam stick, right? And this we use as an aid to restrain the sheep, right? To catch the sheep with the dog. The sheep, naturally enough, wouldn't be hanging around. The lamb comes into the world with its feet out like that and its head down, and sometimes the legs get stuck behind, sometimes the lamb is turned around, different things like that. it's up to myself and the dogs to sort the problem out. So we use this to catch the sheep by that point of the leg there, or by the front leg, and this is an aid for us to restrain the sheep basically. So we take the lambs. It wouldn't pay us to bring every sheep to the vet because the vet would charge you more than the sheep is worth. That's why we do all that work. We administer antibiotics and all that stuff as well if we need be, okay? So the lambs are born out in the field. We have our first predator. The first predator we have is the fox. The fox is an opportunist. If the fox gets an opportunity, he will take a lamb. I call the fox nature's Hoover. He'll cleans up all the afterbirth and stuff like that from the lambing, but if a lamb is in the way, he'll take the lamb as well. Now, the good mother will stamp her feet and she'll run at the fox. The not so good mother will leave one lamb asleep out there and have the other one over here, and that's the one the fox will normally take. So that can be a problem. Now, our second predator is a tiny little thing called the blowfly, but I'll tell you about it in a second. So, we lamb the sheep. After about 4 months we would be selling the sheep for meat. Most of the male sheep we would sell. Most of the sheep in Ireland go to the French market. Thank God the French people like meat and lamb meat. Just now it's very expensive. It's about €7 a kilo because it's scarce. By the time we start to sell the bulk of our lambs, the price will be down to about 4.50 cents a kilo. So there's a hell of a difference. Supply and demand like everything else. Now the Cheviot sheep themselves are what we call hefted or imprinted onto the mountain. So we put mother and daughter back to the same part of the mountain every year, and that's how they stay on the hills. People often ask, there's no fences, so the sheep are imprinted or hefted onto the mountain. Mother and daughter every year. Now the Cheviot sheep themselves we use to keep the mountain. We cross them then with the Suffolk sheep. And the Suffolk sheep are from England, and they're a bit like myself, to put the weight on fairly fast. And that's what we want. So they're a speckledy faced sheep, and we keep those because they'll have maybe 2 lambs, but these girls tend to have smaller crops of lambs. The speckledy ewe will have 2 lambs, and her lambs will fatten faster. We put them with continental breeds like Charolais, Texels, and they're a more meatier sheep. But we can't have any of them without these girls, because these maintain the mountains, and they give that little bit of hardiness to the Suffolk. The Suffolk themselves, if they were to lamb, the lambs wouldn't take a whole lot of hardship. If we could, like the spring we had a really extreme spring this year. We'd no spring actually. It went from winter to summer. We missed the spring, but they wouldn't live very well. So they need to have the hardiness of the Cheviot sheep. Now, how we identify the sheep is very important for us farmers. Traditionally, we'd have the ear mark and we'd have the brand, so we'd have to brand the sheep. Now we still do that. We use a coal brand. It's